Hey everybody, welcome back to the channel. My name's Chris and I'm going to do another weekly-ish reading roundup. And well, normally I start with what I'm drinking, what I'm eating, but a bit of a change this week. I'm on the water. And a lot of it, mainly because I've got a couple of weeks off and, to be honest, I need to lose a bit of weight. Sad story, but yeah, we'll see whether that's achievable or not. I'm not going to go absolutely mad at it. I've been mad at it before and lost a lot of weight, so I know I can do it, but it's more of a doing it in a way that is not punishing or terrible. And let's just start off by drinking lots of water compared to what I normally drink and see if that kind of change of mindset will do. Anyway, enough of that. I'll talk about what I've been listening to as well before we go. This one's a new one actually. It's Bon Iver's Sable Fable. I've actually got it the wrong way around. Let you know because it's just a square in the front. But Bon Iver's Sable Fable, which just came out, which is kind of his latest album that is sort of supposed to be gospel-y or something. I don't know. Sounds like Bon Iver to me, but it is absolutely cracking, and it is something that I am enjoying quite a lot. Especially as it moves from his kind of more stripped down to the more wonderful harmonies that he has in that. If you haven't ever listened to Bon Iver, I think you should do. Especially if you're kind of, let's say, middle aged like me. It sort of has a sensitivity and a tone and a kind of melancholy that resonates with somebody of my age. But anyway, enough of that. What have I been reading? Well, I'll start off with something that I finished kind of a bit more than a week or so ago. But I thought I'd include it here because I actually missed the discussion. We've been reading the SF Masterworks in publication order of these paperbacks, and we are back to PKD. Again, Philip K. Dick with The Scanner Darkly. We have already read Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep, which is, honestly, I read it twice last year, or the year before last actually, and I loved it so much. And we also read another one. It wasn't Ubik. Anyway, it was another one, and I've also read Man High Castle, so I sort of know what to expect with the PKD in some ways. Martian Time Slip was the other one, sorry. But A Scanner Darkly is a book that seems a bit more personal to PKD than anything else, even to the point that he has an author's note at the end about his reasons for writing this. And I don't want to spoil that for anybody, because I think once you finish the book, it gives you a little bit more insight into what he was really thinking about when he was writing about or otherwise. But it basically centers upon a society which is very drug influenced or so. There's a lot of people that are addicted to next gen synthetic drugs like substance D, etc. And it causes side effects that kind of cause a dissociation in part of the brain. And we have a central character that is multiple people at once. That is not much of a spoiler because that's done very, very early, and it charts his two sides of his life. One is as an addict, and one is a law enforcement kind of person, and the kind of ways his life bleeds over and becomes, strange as he looks from the outside in and the inside out in a lot of ways. And I find PKD's writing always fascinating because he's full of ideas and he's full of making you think about why we do certain things and about the human condition and a lot about all of that. It's not a entertaining book. None of his books I think necessarily are entertaining. Maybe Man in High Castle, but even so, that's more, again, philosophical ideas of what would happen if, much like in this book as well, and at the point of what is living and all of that kind of stuff. And I really enjoyed Scanner Darkly. It's not an amazing book, but it certainly is, while short, is something to really make you think. And I seen the film version of it many, many years ago with the cel shaded graphics, etc. And I really can't remember much about it, but I'd be interested to go back and watch it now because I can see why people would be keen to adapt this. I mean, when I was reading it, I was thinking, God, this would be something I'd like to take a go at adapting. Not like for like, because I don't think you could really do that with PKD's books necessarily, a bit like Blade Runner and Do Androids Dream. But there's definitely the kernel of a really interesting and thought-provoking story, and there's certainly some reveals in it that are quite surprising, and that give it that kind of entertainment value as you make your way through it. Really interesting, and I think Ubik is actually up next in the book Dick in a couple of books' time or so. So I'll be interested to get to that. And next up after that was, well, I have a bit of a soft spot for mixing my reading kind of novella length fantasy and sci-fi stories, and this one was just sitting in my bookshop the other day. They always are a bit overpriced, but they're almost perfect a lot of times for breaking up your reading and finding something really juicy and meaty to get into. So things like Murderbot or Jelly Clark's Ring Shout, which was unbelievable. I absolutely loved that one a few years ago, and there are other ones obviously. But this is ML Rio's Graveyard Shift, and she talks about the fact that she was asked to write a novella, kind of experimenting a little bit. And this book has, I think, a better premise and setup than execution. So it really is about a group of people, young people who can't sleep. They all have insomnia of some shape or form, but all for different reasons. Some of habits, some of them it's conditions, some of them it's whatever, it's life circumstances, and they meet in the graveyard regularly to discuss and kind of meet up and do that kind of thing. It's kind of like a community of these people that basically don't sleep at night. Some of them work late nights and all of that kind of stuff. And I thought it was going to be much more of a horror unsettling book the whole way through, and it really wasn't. I mean, it certainly has a lot of those tropes. It feeds in that because while they're at the graveyard one night, they see a mysterious figure dumping something in the ground, in a hole in the ground, because this graveyard has been abandoned for many, many years, and all of a sudden it seems to be an active site, and it sets them on a bit of a chase as to who it is and what they could be doing. And it promises a lot and doesn't quite deliver for me. Now, because it's short, it doesn't really need to, if that makes sense, but in some way it could have done with more to it. In fact, I think the last 15-20 pages are very abrupt. I mean, I get what it's totally going for, the bit that it kind of leaves it almost hanging on a bit of a suspenseful end. Not really a cliffhanger to say, but to kind of give you food for thought at that time. And the investigation, and while it was interesting enough, it didn't outstay its welcome. I sort of wanted more from this very 2.5, 3-star kind of read, and nothing of the class of some of the other novellas that I've mentioned there beforehand. So that was ML Rio's Graveyard Shift. And last that I've read this least, not least have I read these, but the last one that I picked up, it was a bit different again, and this one's Chester Himes' Cotton Goes to Harlem, which is part of the Green Crime Penguin re-release series, and it has a really interesting premise. It's a crime novel, like I said, and it starts off with a guy who's promising the people of Harlem a way back to their homeland and to Africa, part of the Back to Africa movement, where he gets people to donate money and secure their place back on the boat back to Africa and set them up in great land and a place. I mean, it smells like a rat and all the rest, but while this happens, the money that he has collected from the people of Harlem, who have saved up long and hard, they've saved $1,000 each, is stolen. By who, why, and all that kind of stuff is investigated within this. And what the hell has got a bale of cotton got to do with it as well, which is Cotton Comes to Harlem. I sort of assumed that Cotton was a character who came to Harlem to solve a crime, as many of these crime stories kind of do. Again, not a very long read, but quite propulsive and interesting, and definitely for me, the pick of these 3 books that I've been talking about, as much as I liked A Scanner Darkly, this one was a different enough crime story that plays with themes of the time as a period set kind of crime caper, and it follows basically the protagonists, the antagonists, and also the police. 2 policemen that are kind of working the case and how they work it along and what they're kind of trying to find out and solve, and using their experience and know-how around Harlem to solve this crime and the why. And there's lots of interesting characters that they come and meet along the way, and I think that's the bit that separates it from these other 2 books, is that even the side characters, or the people that we come along and meet, are interesting and sort of, you can recognize them from many film, TV series or otherwise, but they're sort of well fleshed out even in a short page count. And while all 3 of these books are quite short, in their own way. I think this one does the best of character development. Maybe because this one's set very much in the real world, and you'll recognise the kind of time and place that it's set in. But yeah, another really good Penguin classic crime that I've read. I've got a number of these to read, and I like working my way through it and picking them up every now and again. I do like a crime book. In fact, I'm thinking about making a little video about kind of prominent crime books and like a first book in a series kind of thing. Maybe if anybody's interested, they might be able to do that, because I do like a bit of a crime novel to kind of break up some of the heavier books that I am reading. So that's what I did read. What have I been reading, or what will I be reading for the next week? Well, I've an interesting kind of couple of weeks, because of my committed reads, 2 of them are finishing up very soon. I've Initiate's Trial, which is finishing up in a couple of weeks, and then I have Absolution by Jeff Vandermeer, which is finishing up this week. So this is book 4 in the Southern Reach saga, I suppose we call it now. It was a trilogy, and we have about 140 pages to go. So one reading session, we do about 100 or so pages every week as part of the Speculations podcast with my friends Varsha, Dan, Steve, and Jared from the Fantasy Thinker channel. And we've been working our way through this, and this is very much feels like stories from Southern Reach rather than necessarily a continuation of the story, because it sort of does a lot of time jumping around. Now, if you've read the Southern Reach trilogy and the kind of weird goings on of Area X, this will be no surprise, because this is what the series does. And I think for this book in particular, I think you go into it knowing that you're not really going to get too much resolution. You're going to get a bit more breadthening out of the story itself, and the world itself. And we get a couple of smaller types of stories and characters that we maybe have seen very, very briefly beforehand. I believe the last section is going to go into somebody that we know a bit better in this and go into their experiences. But I very much enjoy Jeff Vandermeer's writing. I mean, his prose style is fantastic, and it suits this book so much. I can see why people will be very frustrated by the kind of difficulty to comprehend what's going on here, but I think you've just got to go along for the ride and just have fun speculating. And whatever you speculate could be the truth, might not be the truth, doesn't really matter. It's the kind of, I like the way this brain and his writing and the things that he poses to me makes my brain think. And for that, I'll always be very appreciative of, because it's always very original. He always kind of plays about, and I do get the feeling that with it being his most successful series, he would like to come back to it more often, but also I would suggest that only when he has good enough ideas to come back to it. So that is Absolution. I'm looking forward to finishing that up this week, and I'll tell you what I think. But I mean, suffice to say, I very much expect to just say what I said last week kind of still works for this week. The other main read that I'm doing, and I'm just about halfway through, is Richard Swan's The Justice of Kings, that I bought on hardback, God knows, a while ago, let's just say, and kind of never get round to it. And then just while I was reorganising my bookshelves behind me, if anybody notices it, well done. I probably should have the light on shining on them just so you get a better idea. But anyway, I thought, God, I'll pick that up, and then subsequently I have the next couple of books to get to after that. And do you know what? Really like this. It has very light fantasy elements to it, to be honest. Like, it is in a not set on Earth place. It's sort of set in a fantasy world, but we just follow an Emperor Justice guy who goes around and is the law of the land, so to speak, and he'll go around with his clerk, we follow the clerk. It's their voice is who we're following. So they're talking about this Emperor Justice beforehand, so very much in second person a lot of the time, although some of the stuff goes in first person. Anyway, what we follow them around, and there are, it's a book that follows a world that is kind of transitioning from classic, very old style religions, etc., to this new power, this new emperor being set in power, and a new set of religion. And the guy turns up, and the people are worshipping their pagan gods, and they should be worshipping the new gods of Nema, even though the two things are very, very similar. It's more of a controlled power thing, and he's going around kind of making judgment on that. Now, we join this book as a transition, as things seem to be happening within the world, not necessarily in directly to our character, but bigger around the world, and it's sort of written in that style of little did we know then that in the next couple of years this would happen, that kind of stuff. That's within it, which sometimes I find irritating or otherwise. But the bit that I really like about this is because I don't really care about that stuff that's coming in the future. There's a murder mystery that's kind of in the middle of this, as a wife of a nobleman has been killed, and we try and find out. And it's almost like a crime novel in that respect, as they work the case and speak to people and see who's telling the truth and all that kind of stuff. All the while there's this other stuff coming along, and the only real fantasy elements are in the powers that are main character. The main character we follow is the Emperor Justice, and that he has a thing called the Emperor's Voice, where when he shouts at people, he can use this kind of authoritative voice and make people tell the truth to him, etc. So he only uses it sparingly when he really needs a piece of information, where he's got it all pieced together, and he'll kind of say, uses Emperor's Voice to get the last bit of the confession out, if you know what I mean, so he can make it airtight. And he also has the ability to speak to people who have recently died. So people if not long dead, he can kind of converse with them, and as if their soul or their spirit's still there. Now, but halfway through we haven't seen an awful lot of that, so it is very much the murder mystery and the sort of beginnings of the things that are happening within the world. It's a very easy, straightforward read. Not to say that the language is simple, it's very well written, I feel, but it is quite propulsive and very enjoyable to get through, and I'll finish that in the next couple of days because it is kind of so straightforward. And the last thing that I planned to read, well, I've actually read a bit of it this week, and it's a bit of something that I dip in and out of every now and again. Same for graphic novels and stuff. I'm going manga. So I've read JoJo 1 before, and I went and watched the TV series, or at least the first series, 2 series I think of it, which are the first 2 stories of this. And I reread this last week, and I've got volumes 2 and 3 of Phantom Blood, which is the first arc. And well, if you don't know what JoJo's Bizarre Adventure is, it's quite aptly named. It is plenty bizarre. It is got outlandish and ridiculous character drawings. It has ridiculous kind of artwork and poses, and everything's very over the top. And it is definitely one of those, I would say, anime series that you definitely should watch the sub of, because the over the top nature of the voicing is totally the thing with this. I mean, it's ridiculous in all the wrong, nice, right ways, and the manga very much evokes that. The art style's really interesting. I'll pick one of the colour pages here so that you can see. But there we have Dio and Jonathan Joestar, who are 2 main characters of this first volume, so to speak, of this first story, Phantom Blood. And it basically tells the story of Joe, as he is from the anime, who goes to live with a guy who is very rich and well-to-be, Jonathan Joestar's father, and he takes him in because many years ago, Jonathan Joestar's father, also called Joe Joestar. It's a theme of this series, as we'll see. He feels like he has his life saved by this guy who is actually pilfering and stealing stuff from him, and he says that he'll take in his son when the other guy dies, blah blah blah. I mean, the setup's not that interesting in terms of that, but we then get this rivalry between Jonathan Joestar and Dio, as for the father's affections. And so yeah, that's JoJo's Bizarre Adventure. So I'll finish the end of the first arc. I've started number 2 already, and I'll report back to that. I mean, I know what the story is. I'm just sort of wanting to get back into that world because it's plenty interesting, if that makes sense. And that's my reading week gone. My reading week coming up. What have you been reading? What have you been up to? Read any of these before? Anything sound interesting? Let me know. And as always, take care. Good luck with the rest of the week. I'll speak to you soon. Take care. All the best. Bye.